Hello, welcome once again to Lehto's Law. I'm Steve Lehto. I was a disc jockey for a long time, and we used to ask people to call up the radio station to make requests, when in reality, very few radio stations actually play requests. It's one of those deep, dark secrets of old school radio. But when people ask me to do a topic on this show, and a lot of people ask, I do the topic. So a lot of people pointed out to me the story that broke in the news recently about the Tulsa man who was busted for drug smuggling. And in the process, his car collection got seized by the federal government. And then those cars are being auctioned right now as we speak. So the thing is, what does it mean if the government sells you a car that otherwise you couldn't buy? There's an interesting twist to all of this. So let's start at the beginning, which is a good place. This story out of the Tulsa World by Curtis Kilman. Tulsa man pleads guilty in biggest ever TPD pot bust. Faces up to 40 years in federal prison. A man implicated in what Tulsa police say might have been the biggest pot bust in the history of the department pleaded guilty recently to drug conspiracy and money laundering charges in Tulsa federal court. Kong Meng Vang, 34, entered the plea as part of an agreement with federal prosecutors that includes the forfeiture of business property, several residential properties, and 21 vehicles and several weapons. Vang, who also went by the name Steve. Does that mean I start calling myself Vang just for the heck of it? Steve Lehto, but you can call me Vang. Actually, I kind of like that. He faces a statutory maximum sentence of up to 40 years in prison. During his plea hearing, Vang admitted to bringing 1,500 pounds of marijuana from California to sell in the Tulsa area. From April 2015 to April of this year, me and a group of individuals went out to California, located, purchased, and had marijuana transported to the Northern District of Tulsa, Vang said, reading from a statement. Vang was arrested March 24th when law enforcement officers served a search warrant at a home there. A search by authorities of a rental truck at the residence yielded about 1,500 pounds of hydroponically grown marijuana with a street value of $5 million. The only thing I understand that sentence is the phrase rental truck and $5 million. Hydroponically grown marijuana. I mean, I actually do know what that means, but can you tell by looking at it? Or I don't know. A grand jury indicted Vang on charges of drug conspiracy and possessing at least 100 kilograms of marijuana with an intent to distribute. Prosecutors later added the money laundering charge. That sentence brings up several things. Number one, a grand jury indicted him. We talked about grand juries just yesterday. So I hope this is all starting to come together, that the legal education you get from Lehto's Law is, gelling. So where you, hey, I understand it. But a better question is it fair to charge drug dealers in America using the metric system? Because it's 100 kilograms. Who knows what that means? We're Americans. Use pounds. Tulsa Police Chief Chuck Jordan said at the time it was the largest marijuana bust he had seen during his tenure with the Tulsa Police Department, which dates back to 1969. As part of his plea on the money laundering charge, Vang admitted to using drug proceeds to buy an East Tulsa house, which means that gets forfeited. Vang agreed to forfeit his automobile business, Vang's Dyno Performance, at 9901 East 46th Place. Now, why wouldn't he call it Steve's Dyno Performance? Oh well. As well as 7 residential properties in Tulsa and 21 vehicles. That's the key here, 21 vehicles. Vang, who's been free on bond, is scheduled to be sentenced December 4th. In addition to Tulsa Police, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration and Criminal Investigations Division of the IRS participated in the criminal investigation. So Steve, or Vang, is probably going to prison for a long, long time because he had some metric amount of hydroponically grown marijuana in his possession. But the bigger question is that they found these 21 cars, and it appears that he's admitted to buying some of this stuff with drug money. And we've talked before about civil asset forfeiture. But here you've got an actual conviction, you've got an actual guilty plea. And apparently as part of that plea, they said, we want you to plea and specifically say that you bought this stuff with criminal proceeds. And that way, there's no question that they can seize those assets and auction them off and then that money, gets put to better use by the U.S. government. Just kidding on that one, obviously. So, Chris Perkins wrote the article, and I picked this up off of roadandtrack.com, but I've seen it at Jalopnik. My good buddies at Jalopnik had a story on it, and so did many other people. But the U.S. government is auctioning a bunch of not street legal JDM cars. You can now buy an R34 Skyline GTR from the feds, but here's the catch: you can't register it. So here's the deal, and again, the story by Chris goes through about pretty much the same stuff I just told you, but they break out what they think to be the more interesting details for the car connoisseurs in the audience. Vang's Dyno Shop, also, he was a huge fan of Japanese performance cars, so he's got a bunch that aren't yet legal to drive in the U.S. And there's this really weird rule, and I'm not going to get too heavily into it here, but cars that aren't legal to drive in America because they're built to different standards. Something people like to argue with me about when I say they have to be brought up to American standards. People get offended that I use the word up. And I say, do you think we're bringing them down to American standards? But I'm not going to go there today. But cars built in other markets that are not built to U.S. standards could be anything from different emissions standards. It could be different crash test standards. It could be standards that we have that are somehow different from the car makers and what they build them to for the European market or the Japanese market, okay? And so if you have one of these cars, and I'm talking about cars in general first, that's built to another market's standards but does not conform to U.S. standards for whatever reason, okay? There are ways to bring them into the country, but it usually involves you saying, oh, I'm going to bring this car in and I'm going to make it conform. And you might recall that was one of the plot points of Rain Man with Tom Cruise. He bought a bunch of Lamborghinis allegedly that needed to be, made to conform to U.S. standards. I'm not saying the movie was necessarily accurate in that regard. I'm simply pointing out that was one of the issues in the movie. And there are cars that are in other markets that are really, really cool, that really can't be made to conform to U.S. standards very economically or in any way that makes sense. So they have certain rules about these cars, and one of the rules is that after 25 years passes, under certain circumstances, they can then be imported to the U.S., and they can then be used here and driven here under certain circumstances. I'm not going to get into it, but the point is there's this 25-year time frame after which it becomes easier to get those cars into the U.S. So the question is, we've got a bunch of these cars, and it appears that many of them were brought here illegally. Somehow he got these cars here. Or if they were brought here legally, they certainly weren't registered and so on for street use. Okay? So among the cars up for sale are a 1999 Nissan Skyline GTR, which I know is a car that the fanboys love, a 2000 Toyota Chaser, a 2000 Mitsubishi Lancer Evo V1 Tommy Mackinnon edition. That sounds Finnish to me. And a 1998 Subaru Impreza WRX STI. And a 1998 Toyota Celica GT4. Now, these are all cool cars, according to Chris Perkins, and I agree with him. But none were originally sold in the U.S., and all are less than 25 years old. There's the problem. They're not old enough yet. So they can't be legally registered here. So the auction listing actually comes with a warning that the cars don't comply with the U.S. EPA regulations and thus are only approved for off-road or track use. And additionally, I'll get to the actual listings here in a second, each listing says the cars are, quote, never to be titled, registered, or operated on U.S. roadways, unquote. They reached out to the auction company to see whether any of these cars could be legally registered once they become 25 years old, and apparently they've not gotten a response to that. The bidding has opened but will end on April 1st, 2019 at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And so Chris Perkins asks rhetorically, if you ever wanted to buy a non-street legal R34 GTR from the U.S. government, this is your chance. So here's the thing. Like I said, These cars appear to have been brought in somehow, and they're not legal to be registered here. But now the U.S. government is selling them, and it's an interesting proposition because how else would you get one of these cars? You'd have to do it the hard way, bring it in through the country and jump through all kinds of hoops, which might not even be possible. And so, for instance, I'm looking right now at four of the cars. Here is auction lot 110, 1999 Nissan Skyline GTR R34. Location, Oklahoma. At this moment in time that I'm reading this, it has a high bid of $60,000. 43 people have bidded. Notice, and this is all caps, off-road/track use only. Never to be titled, registered, or operated on U.S. roadways. Does not comply with U.S. EPA standards and emissions, as is where is. No guarantees expressed or implied. See terms and conditions. And then it says Bayside Blue. Link to spec sheet under main thumbnail image. Keys yes, starts yes with battery boost. Odometer reads 74,000 kilometers. And then it comes with a branded title. And the branded title is going to say off-road/track use only. And this is bill of sale only. Okay? So all of the cars that I'm looking at here, including the Toyota Chaser, the Mitsubishi Galant VR4, and the Mitsubishi Lancer Evo V1 Tommy Mackinnon, all say this. Off-road, track use only, never to be titled, registered, or operated on U.S. roadways, and does not comply with U.S. EPA standards and emissions, as is whereas. And then down below it says branded title, off-road, track use only, bill of sale. So what you're buying when you buy one of these vehicles at auction, if you are one of the lucky bidders, is you will then become owner of a car that would have been really, really difficult to get into the country. But you legally own it. So it's now your car. And one of the things that we talk about when we discuss automobile ownership is what you can do with your car. We've talked about this before. If you own your car outright, no one's got a lien on it, you're not making payments on it, it's titled to you. You own your car. That means that you have the right to buy it, sell it, transfer ownership in it, let someone else use it. You have the right to destroy it. If you wanted to, you could buy that car, take it to a crusher, and crush it if you wanted to. I'm just pointing out that you can do that. You can also put it in your garage and just look at it for the rest of your life. You could take it out in your backyard and bury it. Why you'd want to do these things, I don't know, but the point is you can do these things. It's your car. Now, can you take any car you own out and drive it? Well, we've discussed this before. To drive a car legally in America on public roadways in all 50 states requires you to register the car, usually get insurance in the car, and then also that you have a driver's license valid in at least one state. So for the vehicle to be legally driven on the road by a licensed driver, you need to get the vehicle plated, which is actually registered. You get it. You go to the Secretary of State's office or DMV, and you register the vehicle. They give you a registration, a little piece of paper that says that you, owner of this vehicle, got this license plate so the car can be driven on the road legally now. And you did whatever's necessary in the state within which you registered it. As part of the registration process, they give you a license plate or a tag, and you put that on the back of your car. And if you're in a state like California that has one in the front, you put one in the front of your car. It ruins the look of the front of the car, but in California they do that for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is so that they can use speed cameras, which I think they still use. But the point is that you can register a car if you own it. Well, you can't register one of these cars. You can't. Okay. And the title's going to be branded in such a way that says you cannot register this car. So the question then becomes, what can you do with it? Well, all the things I said before about you can look at it, you can put it in your garage, you can bury it in your backyard, you can destroy it, or you can sell it. Those are all things you can do with the car. But you can't drive it on the road legally. Now, if you buy one of these cars and you want to track it, there are places you can go and rent track time, and you can go out and drive on a track. Have fun with it. The track is not a public roadway, so you don't need to have that car registered to do that. If you owned a big chunk of private property that was paved, Okay, let's suppose that you own a couple thousand acres someplace, and you paved an acre of it in black, asphalt. You can go out there and drive your car around all day long. Private property doesn't need to be registered out there. But the point is, you cannot drive these cars legally on the roadways because you can't get them registered because they don't comply with federal law. The big question is, when the 25 years runs out, okay, could you then seek to have these cars registered under the loophole that allows you to register a car that's over 25 years old? And the question is, can you do that? And the answer is, we don't know. And the reason we don't know is that the auction actually is using the language that it goes never to be titled, registered, or operated on U.S. roadways. Never. Never. And I don't know that they can necessarily make that stick. And that's the issue. Because after 25 years, it seems to me that you should be able to point at it and go, look, it's 25 years old now. Now it falls under the exception of a vehicle that's over 25 years old, and it's in the country legally now, because I bought it legally back then from the government. They can't say that was an illegal sale. So can we now apply and jump through the hoops to get it registered at that point? Possibly. But the problem is you've got that branded title. And the title branding, which is title off-road track use only, might be a problem. Because once a title gets branded, removing a brand from a title can be difficult. Now, we've talked about this before also. If a vehicle becomes a lemon and gets bought back by a manufacturer under the lemon law in a state that has branded titles, that title will say on it, branded, automobile warranty manufacturer buyback or something like that. And to get that removed, you go retitle it in a state that doesn't recognize that brand. But the question is, are there any states out there that do not recognize the brand off-road track use only? So it might be that after 25 years from the date of birth of the car, the DOB, it might be that you could walk in someplace, go, I want to now get this thing with a clean title with no brand on it. They might say, we can't remove that brand. That brand is, it's like luggage. It just follows you around everywhere. So that's an interesting question. If somebody asked me, says, Steve, should I buy one of these cars and bank on the fact that I can get it titled properly as soon as the 25 years runs out? I'd say, I don't know if I'd make that bet. I don't know. It might be worth it to you, because if you lose on that, you got a car. Sure, you can look at it. You can drive it on your own property. You can destroy it. You can bury it, or you can sell it to somebody else. But can you ever get a clean title to this? It's unclear. So I'm going to continue following this. There's been a lot of chatter on the internet about it. And if anything else remarkable occurs to me or is brought to my attention, I will update this video. Otherwise, questions or comments, shoot them below. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.